Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and welcome to the Movies TV Mad podcast. Before we get into our first conversation about Wonder Woman 3, I want to read you a quote from Olivia Wilde that sums up today's entertainment industry in the West. The English-speaking entertainment industry is dying, and quotes like this and opinions like this are the reason why. Olivia Wilde based Chris Pine's Don't Worry Darling character on Jordan Peterson's a pseudo-intellectual hero to the incel community. Now, she couldn't leave it at that. She could have just left it at that, right? She shouldn't have even mentioned Peterson, but she shouldn't have even said any of this. This is just bad marketing. But anyway, so she's saying that Peterson is a hero to the incel community, but she has to tell us who she thinks incels are. Incels are disenfranchised, mostly white men who believe they are entitled to sex from women. Wow. Don't hide your views, Liv. Just put it out there. So this is bad marketing, because this is not how you sell a movie. This is why the English-speaking entertainment industry is dying. That's why there's this divide. That's why, and we will get into the Rings of Power a little bit later on, because I watched the first 2 episodes, even though I swore on this very channel I wouldn't, and I'm going to have to serve some humble pie on today's Movies TV Mad podcast. Yes, I liked it. But anyway, we'll get into it a little bit later on. Don't switch it off because you don't like the fact that I liked it. Let me explain myself, because I've got very balanced views about everything that's going on with Rings of Power right now. So stuff like this from Olivia Wilde, as I say, is bad marketing. There's no intelligence or research or education to this. This is why the extreme left don't like the fact when we say there was a conspiracy to kill John Lennon, there was a conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy, and Lee Harvey Oswald, whatever he was or whatever he wasn't, didn't do the job alone. But the extreme left will call that a conspiracy theory because they want to believe one single angry white man could kill a public official or a very popular, singer or movie star or whatever. These are the opinions from these people. So, of course, there's such things as incels. Of course, they're not mostly white men. You can have white incels, black incels, Indian, Asian, whatever, Anglo-Greek Cypriot incels. I don't think I'm an incel, but who knows? Maybe the extreme left have a different opinion of me. But the point is, right, an incel could be from any fucking community, but that's the extreme left for you. But once we just identify people as an incel, it becomes a problem, because everything in life isn't black and white. And I'm sorry to tell you this, especially you, Liv, who don't really get it. An incel started somewhere. It's complicated. Now, the extreme left hated Todd Phillips' The Joker movie because they believed it celebrated the incel, which it didn't. It didn't defend his decisions. What it said is, this is a mentally ill man who was tortured as a child, right? And who was lied to from the beginning, right? Loses their psych meds, their access to a counsellor. So that doesn't mean his actions are justified, but there's a level of understanding, a nuance to how people become who they become. Some people will go through absolute shit and become mercenaries, charity workers, and some people just aren't mentally strong enough and become maybe killers, rapists, whatever, right? It depends on the human brain. It depends on the mentality. So, as I say, the issue, debating this isn't the issue. The point that she said it, she's cost this movie money. I don't understand why they talk like this. It's clear what Don't Worry Darling means, right? It's a blatant fucking title. You know it's about toxic masculinity. You know it's about white male incels. We know what you're doing. It's everywhere. You don't have to bash us over the head with it, because all your content is blatantly like this, when we're talking about the English-speaking entertainment industry. This is where we are now. For me, it's really, really sad, because what I think is the biggest travesty here is that these white male incels she's talking about are going to be her audience. Now, she doesn't want to accept that. Or maybe she does. Maybe she wants to bring that audience to her film. Maybe that's why she's doing it, to cause controversy. Controversy sells, right? But that's your audience. So when you abuse your audience, you get yourself in trouble. Now, there was an interesting situation with Captain Marvel and Brie Larson where she was having a go at the white male over 25's community. Now, that film still made $1 billion. It made $1 billion because it was sandwiched between Infinity War and Endgame. And I don't think Captain Marvel is a terrible movie either. There's a couple of extremist kind of situations there. But if you ignore them, it's a lot better than a lot of the movies they've made recently. That's for sure. But of course, it's an extremist movie, and the marketing was, hero. The marketing was very extremist. Hero. I mean, I can't anymore. I can't. But you're basically calling out your own customers. These are the people who go to cinemas. It's the straight white males who go and watch cinema and make this industry money. So once you wage war against the very community making you money, you've got a problem. And this is why the industry is going bankrupt. This is why cinema chains are going bankrupt. First of all, there's not enough variety in the industry, but extremist situations like this, when a director, where maybe these white males actually looked up to her before she said this, and now they're thinking, well, fuck you, I'm not going to go and see your film. Because the entertainment industry, whether the industry and critics want to believe this, is a consumer-based industry. It's no different than going to the supermarket or the sweet shop and being told, you're a white male, you're not coming in my store, and you're not going to buy that can of cola. It's the same thing, everyone. And divisive things like this may make her feel better that she's making a film. These are the statements the people in Hollywood want to make in their stories today. They don't want to talk about the third world and the hunger and the famine they're going through, serious issues around the world. No, they want to talk about white male incels. What they want to talk about identity politics. And this is why this English-speaking industry is going bankrupt. It's embarrassing. If she reads back what she said, she should be embarrassed. Now, what's more ironic about these people and these female extremists is that she's dating someone. She's dating Harry Styles, a white male. Now, is there no such thing as a female incel? Are there no female incels in Hollywood? Of course there are. In the world, this is the problem, because the way they look at the world is imaginary. It's not real. Everything the extreme left say is ridiculous, and they've got a stranglehold on this industry. Look, it's not bad for me. I grew up in the 80s, the 90s, the early noughties, where we had amazing films where the motivation was to make great entertainment. So I haven't been robbed of anything. But this generation is being robbed when it's people like them making statements like that. So Xolo Maridueña, I can't say his name properly, I'm sorry, who's in Cobra Kai, has become very successful. He's also been cast as Blue Beetle, which is very, very exciting. I'm going to read an article, an interview with him, where he speaks about how nervous he was when he first spoke to the former DC Films president, Walter Hamada, about the role. Because Blue Beetle is a very interesting character, a very popular character among DC Comics fans. So it's going to be interesting what kind of movie this is going to be. I have opinions about this movie because, this is about a Latino lead. So if we were to see this movie and it's part of the DCEU, and then the DCEU is kind of left behind, then, Zaslav and his DC Studios president start again with a new franchise. What happens to Xolo? This is the problem. For me, I said, Blue Beetle should have been the beginning of the new franchise. Maybe it still will be. So let's check out what Xolo had to say. DC's new superhero Xolo Maridueña on Blue Beetle Cobra Kai and keeping his cool. The 21-year-old rising star discusses the 5th season of the Netflix karate drama. We're not going to get into that. I'm more interested in the DC situation, and how he learned that nobody wants to work with a jerk. Yeah, fancy that, eh? By James Hibbard of The Hollywood Reporter. Xolo Maridueña was freaking out. The 21-year-old Cobra Kai star had been invited to lunch with DC Films chief Walter Hamada and Warner's executive Galen Weisman. Maridueña figured the lunch had something to do with DC's upcoming superhero project Blue Beetle, which was set to become the first movie led by a Latino actor. Maridueña, I can't say his name, let's just call him Xolo. Xolo previously had a Zoom chat with Hamada, but hadn't yet auditioned for the role and had exactly 0 previous movie credits. Why do these guys want to meet? Xolo wondered. What's happening? I was so nervous. There's so much riding on what they think about me. While waiting for a table, Hamada tried to calm Xolo down, calm his nerves. Xolo recalls Hamada saying, "This role of Blue Beetle is going to be really important to this universe. We want to just make sure that whoever we go with is a real person and we're not just hiring a face. It's about more than what's in front of the camera." So I like that from Hamada. I like that. And Hamada's a good guy. Hamada just got himself wrapped up with certain situations. I don't agree with what he was going to do with the DCEU, replacing Superman and Batman with Supergirl and Batgirl, but that's the environment we're in today. But the thing is, Walter Hamada told him this was going to be very important for the future of DC because Hamada had a plan. It was to reboot the DCEU via the Flash movie. It was still the same franchise. The past still happened, but they would be in a new timeline. That's not going to happen anymore. So he told Xolo Blue Beetle would be a very important character. Going forward, will this still be the same thing? Now, I believe these 4 DCEU movies coming next year will be delayed. I think 2 next year, 2 the following year, and then Matt Reeves back the Batman sequel and Todd Phillips the Joker sequel in the same year, just to give them enough time to do this new 10-year plan. As I say, personally, I'd rather see Xolo's Blue Beetle movie be the beginning of a brand new franchise, because I just don't see how the DCEU has much of a future. A statement like that would typically make a Hollywood actor even more nervous, a real person, but none of us are that. Yet Xolo felt reassured, and it's probably because if you spend time chatting with Xolo, pronounced Sholo, all right, Sholo, it's not Xolo, it's Sholo, all right, we'll get it right. You find he's full and modest, always giving answers that come across so grounded that it's tough to believe he's been working in this business doing TV ads and shows since he was 10 years old. Well, I'll tell you why Sholo, get his name right, but I'll tell you why Sholo is such a down-to-earth young man. He hasn't been working in the industry long enough to become an arsehole. Let's hope he never becomes an arsehole like most of them are. And, you know, I've been around a lot of these people. I spent 6 months in Hollywood. I know where the bodies are buried. I actually had a long phone call the other day, and I've been made an offer, and that means I'd have to move back to LA. Now, I'm happy here in Cyprus, writing, producing, directing and starring in my own plays and developing the first English-speaking dramas here on Cypriot TV. So it's going to be a big decision for me. The thing is, it's quite lonely out here for me. You'll see me on Twitter a lot because I don't have many friends out here. All my friends are in the UK and in LA, so I do miss a lot of the people in LA. We'll see what happens there. But Xolo Hart was about to start racing again. As Hamada walked him to a table, the actor realised his lunch group was far bigger than advertised. There was Blue Beetle director Manuel Soto, and screenwriter Gareth Dunnett Alossa, and the film's producers and several others. The actor realised this wasn't just some getting-to-know-you chat. This was a superhero surprise party. So Sholo had already landed the role of Blue Beetle without having read a single line of dialogue. I felt my throat close up and my eyes started to water. Sholo says, it was overwhelming. Below, Sholo discusses his upcoming DC superhero debut, the 5th season of Cobra Kai, premiering blah, blah, blah. So he's just talking about Cobra Kai, which we don't really want to get into. But I just thought I'd read it to you because it's very interesting that Hamada said to him this was going to be a very important character within the DCEU. Now, of course, my opinion is the DCEU is done. That may not be so. They may try and fix the DCEU. Yes, this would be the third entity trying to fix the DCEU. I think it's ridiculous. If that's what they're trying to do, they need to start again, but it isn't good for people like Sholo, who, as you can see, it was very important for him to get this role. So I don't know what's going to happen here. So if you're worried about Blue Beetle not being released, Blue Beetle will absolutely be released. That's why Zaslav made sure it was transferred over to the theatrical system and not on HBO Max. He wanted the same for Batgirl. People blaming him for the Batgirl cancellation. He just couldn't do it. Batgirl wasn't of the quality to be in cinemas. It wasn't the director's fault. It was the lack of a budget from former chair of Warner Brothers Pictures, Toby Emmerich. So that's a sad situation. But there's a lot of big decisions to be made within the DC cinematic universe. And very shortly, we're going to be talking about the future of Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 3. And do these things actually have a future in this 10-year plan? If I'm correct, and these final 4 DCEU movies are going to be the final DCEU movies, how sad. I'm devastated if I'm right, and this is how the franchise is going to end. And it should never have been like this because of bureaucratic interference and bad decisions. The worst decision was bringing in an auteur, Christopher Nolan, to kind of godfather a DC extended universe. When you're looking to attract the commercial mainstream audience and you're shouting at me saying, yes, but he did the Dark Knight trilogy. He did, and it was successful, but the Dark Knight trilogy wasn't controversial, and Batman can be dark. He can be put in the real world, but when you go doing that, and then he goes and brings Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder again has the same kind of way of making stuff that Chris does, but Snyder takes it to another level. And, you know, David Goyer decided that Superman should break Zod's neck. And when you're trying to attract a commercial audience, if you want families and children to watch these films, you can't be doing that. So the DCEU was a problem from the beginning. The decision-making from the beginning was wrong. And I love Snyder's trilogy. And it shouldn't have just been a trilogy, it should have been more. But once you've got Snyder in, and he's got a plan for 5 movies, you've got to stick with that plan. One minute we were getting 2 or 3 Justice League movies, then we were getting just 1, then Snyder was fired. Let's say it how it is. Once he's there, you've got to stick with his plan. Because his movies were making money, they just weren't making the money they wanted them to make. So, you've got to go with Snyder's Justice League 2, Justice League 3, and Ben Affleck's The Batman. Let the whole thing play out. It all would have made solid money, and by now, it would have been done. They would have integrated a Flashpoint to start the universe again, and we would have been done with the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse fans would have been happy. They would have seen all of it. It would have ended. They would have followed Zack to Netflix and Rebel Moon or whatever he would have done. Maybe things would have been different if he wasn't fired, you know, so unceremoniously by WB. But if they just let the thing run, we would have been done. And this franchise wouldn't be a mess right now. Now, people were complaining about Man of Steel and BVS. Let them complain. The films still were making okay money. Not the kind of money they wanted to make. But you let it happen. But they didn't. And as soon as they sacked Snyder, this is where the problems were. So we now have got this merged company, Warner Brothers Discovery. They can see the franchise is a mess. They can see there's no saving this franchise. So I think they're going to start again with this brand new 10-year plan. Some people think the Snyderverse will be restored. I don't. I'm not against that. I don't think it's a wise move. But because if you want to reach a commercial audience, and if you want to please hardcore fans, I don't think that's the best step forward. Unless you have Snyder work with a Bruce Timm or something, so you balance the situation out. Actually, I think that would be a really great team. So, in the business sense, in the kind of appealing to the mainstream commercial audience, you've got to bring people in who understand DC, who read the comics. I'm not saying that Snyder doesn't understand DC, but there's got to be there's got to be a variety, a business brain and a storytelling brain. That's what Kevin Feige's got. That's before, prior to Phase 4 and his own apocalypse, things were going very, very well because there was a balance there. And so I think it's a big shame if the DCEU is going to finish like this. They haven't greenlit any movies. Yes, they greenlit Joker 2 and the Batman sequel, but that's not within the DCEU. Blue Beetle was the last movie to be greenlit, and when it was greenlit for HBO Max. Now, I've given you the comparison before, that another thing about the Hamada plan was there was going to be more DCEU content on HBO Max rather than being released via the cinematic system. And if you don't believe me, just look at the slate, look at Hamada's slate. So you've got 4 movies happening over there, and then the rest of the stuff is streaming, and they weren't really looking to greenlight more cinematic movies. We know the direction they were going to go in. It's like Marvel Studios and D+. It's the same thing. And also, the quality isn't very good on streaming because they don't spend as much money because the profit margins aren't there. There are bigger profit margins in investing huge money in a superhero blockbuster for the theatrical system. So that's obvious. So as we saw with Batgirl, the quality isn't there. But if Batgirl was given 200 million and directed by someone, someone huge, and I'm not saying these lads directing it didn't know what they were doing, but they were certainly cheaper than your Matt Reeves or Chris Nolan. So Batgirl wasn't given the respect she deserved. And this is nothing to do with Zaslav, this is to do with Toby Emmerich, the former Warner Brothers Pictures chair. So we're now here. We've got delayed movies. They delayed the movies from this year. They've delayed the movies again. And there's apparently a 10-year plan. And now we come to a very interesting situation because no one at Warner Brothers Discovery has mentioned Patty Jenkins, Gal Gadot, and Wonder Woman 3. We've heard about Constantine. That's still happening apparently. The Green Lantern Corps TV show is still happening apparently. Lots of different projects that were going to happen are still happening apparently. I don't believe a lot of those projects are going to happen. But anyway, we'll have to find out in the fullness of time what happens there. But no mention of Patty Jenkins, Gal Gadot, and Wonder Woman 3. Now, Wonder Woman 3 was greenlit as soon as Wonder Woman 84 was released. This was a huge mistake because this is what happened with Zack Snyder's Justice League originally. Even before BVS, they had greenlit that movie. He was actually starting to make that movie, in the process of making that movie, as Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice was in cinemas and had this divisive reaction. You don't do that unless you're super confident on something. I mean, it does show confidence when you keep on greenlighting stuff. But also, if you're of the mind, don't worry about the reactions. Let's just do this. Let's just do this. Snyder's a good director. Let's just do this. If that's the attitude, if that was the attitude of that, great. But then they ended up firing him. So it's done. But when you look at, the studio didn't like Wonder Woman 84. It came out of Patty's own mouth. She said that they didn't like the mouse scene. They were right not to like the mouse scene. We're talking about Walter Hamada didn't like the mouse scene. He didn't like the opening for Themyscira sequence. Actually, now he felt it was pointless. There was no need to have that there. But actually, the Themyscira sequence with young Lily Aspel as young Diana is the best fucking thing about the movie. It is. That kid is fucking sensational, right? I would actually, if it was up to me, if I was in charge of DC Studios and I was going to keep the DCEU, she will be getting her own fucking movie as young Diana, or at least an HBO Max show. Lily is great. In fact, I was thinking the other day she would be a great companion for Doctor Who. She's such a great little actor. I've got so much time for her, and she was my entry point into the first Wonder Woman film. She was just amazing in that first film as well. Anyway, right, so Hamada, there was a lot of things he didn't like about that movie, but he was under pressure. The studio wanted Patty to have free reign. She had free reign. It was difficult. These are the complicated situations that Walter had, and that's why it's not all his fault when people attack him. So we know that Wonder Woman 84 is what it is. So for me, and knowing Zaslav and the ruthless decisions that he's making here, I think it's incomprehensible for him to greenlight a Wonder Woman 3 starring Gal Gadot and directed by Patty Jenkins. Now, Gal has aligned herself with Patty. She's Team Patty. This is an interesting thing now. Are we sticking with the DCEU timeline? Are we moving for this 10-year plan, being part of a different franchise? That means there will be no Gal Gadot. There will be no Patty Jenkins. There will be no Henry Cavill. There will be no Ben Affleck. Now, for now, right, obviously, it looks like Cavill's going to come back. I hope he does. Will there be a Man of Steel 2? Well, if I'm right and they're doing away with the DCEU, no, there won't be. But you will see him in cameos. You will see him in the Flash movie, I'm sure of it. I'm sure they're going to go back and do something there if they haven't already done it. He will cameo in all these movies. But I just can't see the DCEU continuing. But if you want to reignite the DCEU, a Man of Steel 2 would be a fucking fantastic place to start. We'll see what happens there. So I don't hold much hope for Patty Jenkins getting her Wonder Woman 3 movie. Now, again, if you want to continue the DCEU, the best thing to do here, we've discussed it before, we've discussed it on lives and pre-records, is to do a Holy Trinity movie with Batfleck, with Cavill's Superman, and Gadot's, Wonder Woman. That's what I would do. It will be a celebration of these three characters together. One of my favourite moments of BVS is when Wonder Woman, the newly introduced Wonder Woman, Batfleck, and Superman are standing there together. Is she with you? No, I thought she was with you. That's a great piece of dialogue because in the comic books, they've both kind of, had relationships with Diana. So it was a great beginning to a great relationship. So Snyder did a great job with Wonder Woman, by the way, and Superman and Batman. Everything he touched, he really got it right. It's a shame then that the mainstream audience don't like him very much. The announcement that he was directing MOS didn't go across very, very well. And I think people took that negativity into it. And I'll talk about that with Rings of Power later on, where before we've seen something, we make a prejudgment on it because of the other discussions going on about it. So no, I don't foresee, we may get a Wonder Woman 3, but I don't think Patty Jenkins will be directing it. So there's nothing on that yet. Now, she claims she's been writing that film for the past 2 years. That means it's not happening because by now there should be action called on that movie, and there's no action being called on that movie. But of course, since Wonder Woman 84, Jenkins has been losing jobs galore because people can see she's not a very good director. This is where we are in entertainment now, that we've got people being accused of review bombing. Does review bombing happen? Yes. So let me ask the industry, why do you allow people to rate content before it's fucking released? I think Rotten Tomatoes changed that, didn't they? So yeah, basically it doesn't matter when they go on there. If they want to review bomb something, they can review bomb something. For me, these studios and these companies have to think about this. Is it worth having a Rotten Tomatoes? Is it worth having aggregate scores for these things? If people are going to abuse these things, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but if people are going to abuse these services, then they shouldn't be allowed to go on there. It's as simple as that. I think it's great for fans to have a voice and say, I didn't like this because of that. But if you're literally going on there because there's black hobbits and, you don't like the fact that we've got a kind of, a young female, the one who finds the wizard in Rings of Power. We discuss it. I don't know these characters' names, so it's going to be that one and that one. I liked her. I thought she was great. If you've got issues because, there's more black people in this series or because it's led more prominent with females, it's happening a lot in the industry. It's happening a lot. Because in the olden days, it was all male leads and women didn't get much of a chance. So now Hollywood's saying, right, men, you're taking a back seat. Now the girls are going to do this. Now, whether that's right or wrong, maybe we should all be standing together rather than putting men to one side and things like that. That's another fucking discussion. But if you genuinely don't like Rings of Power, then that's fine. And if you've got a constructive view on it, that's fine. But if your motivation is to go at it on a kind of aggregate score meter, just because you don't like the representation and diversity, but you know it's actually a good piece of work. That's something else. For me, I don't get the point of this whole aggregate scores anyway. Now, clearly, Rotten Tomatoes has got a good name for itself. So if something's verified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, then that's kind of good marketing for the content. But we know there's a disparity now, a lack of trust with critics now. We don't trust their views because they've become very extremist and political as well. So I feel these aggregates, these aggregate meters just don't work anymore. And I think they should actually all be abolished. They're not working. If you want to shit on something because of that reason or the other, you can do what I'm doing right now. Start a YouTube channel, speak on Twitter. But I think these aggregate scores, score meters, or whatever you want to call them, have become pointless and they should just be abolished. There's no point in them. We don't trust the critics anymore. So no one believes, the verified critic, scores and things like that. Nobody trusts the fan scores. When I watch a Fandom Menace video like Nerdrotic or Geeks and Gamers, yes, I do watch them for balance, but yeah. And as I say, their presentation is very good and they make some very good points and also some points I don't agree with. But the point is, when they say, look at the fan scores, and they laugh and they think it's something clever. When I look at those fan scores, I just think, so what? It doesn't actually fucking mean anything. And it doesn't. Anyway, there's been a lot of negativity and toxicity aimed towards Rings of Power. I did the same fucking thing. And I'm going to have to apologise because I made a video saying Rings of Power is a disaster because of what was going on, the changes to the Tolkien kind of mythology, and how fans are angry about it. And I was just discussing it and what the extremist entertainment industry is about today. But guess fucking what? And I said on this channel I wouldn't watch it. But I thought I should watch it because I should know what I'm talking about as a YouTuber, right? And I watched it. And I fucking loved it. First of all, it looks stunning. Yes, so it should with the technology they have today. The music, I didn't know Bear McCreary was from Walking Dead and other stuff was actually scoring this series. The score is fucking beautiful. And I like the show. I like the characters. Yes, how do you say her name? Gladriel? Is it Gladriel? Gladriel can come across a bit kind of stoic and serious. But at the end of the day, that's what the character is. That's really what the character was in Jackson's movies. Now, I'm not going to say this series is anywhere near the quality of what Peter Jackson did. It doesn't matter who was making this. That's impossible. But as a show, standing on its own rights about Lord of the Rings of Power, I think the characters are depicted very, very well. I just like it. I think it's okay. I think it's solid. It looks great. It's compelling. It's epic. Don't let people rob this from you. These people are making lots of money from their YouTube channels. You should at least go and see it. And if you don't want to support it because you don't agree with the representation or inclusion thing about it, then find another way of watching it. I wouldn't encourage you to do that. I enjoyed watching it on UHD, the sound blaring out my TV. Look, for me, it was a wonderful experience. And look, it's a complicated situation because people are saying, the books are like that, the series should be the same, and you shouldn't try and do this and do that, and intersexual racism, or let me say that again, into what is it? Feminism. I forgot. Intersexual feminism, I think they call it. But listen, so it's a complicated issue. This is not about being racist or not racist, or being bigoted and not bigoted. The point being that the Tolkien scholars, the Tolkien fans are saying you're making changes we don't want. But Nerdrotic, when he was reviewing this, and I've complimented him before, well presented, makes a lot of good points. He said even if this wasn't about Tolkien, this series, it would still be bad. Well, I'm sorry, Gary, you're wrong. You're wrong. In my opinion, you are absolutely wrong. This is a really good show. I'm not saying it's the greatest thing I've ever seen, But for a piece of entertainment to watch on a Friday, right, if you're into this medieval thing, and medieval storytelling is dominating again. We've got House of Dragons, which is also absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power, and I will continue to watch it. Now, the other situations, the deep discussions about representation and what Tolkien did in his books, and how Tolkien wouldn't have approved of this or not, those are different discussions. You can have those discussions about canon and, you know, what the producers of this show have done differently to what Tolkien did. That's a valid fucking discussion, and that's fine. But you can't tell me or anyone else that this show is rubbish because you don't agree with those producers. I'm happy for you to have those discussions. I'm happy to have those discussions with you. But the point being, it's still a very well-made show, very well written, yes, I'm sorry, it is, directed and performed. It's brilliant, and I'm looking forward to the journey. Now, marketing-wise and, you know, PR-wise, it isn't a good look for the show, what's going on right now. It's very aggressive. Now, there is this discussion about, you know, kind of review bombing. And, you know, I went at Mark Ruffalo for saying something has to be done. And I accused him of being kind of like a communist. He wants to be in communist Russia, where he doesn't want anyone questioning the entertainment industry. And I think it's important to question the entertainment industry because it's a very corrupt industry sometimes. But there's something else happening politically between the fans and, you know, Hollywood itself. And it's a serious discussion to have. So I wouldn't invalidate the Tolkien scholars for what they're saying. But what I would say is, I understand what you're saying and there's a debate to be had there. But ultimately, you're saying that this is embarrassing, this is She-Hulk level bad, and it's not. It's not. This is not Morbius. This is not She-Hulk. Rings of Power, in my opinion, is a very well-made, epic show. And I'll be watching it every Friday on Amazon Prime. Now, let's get to the matter in hand. Is the Rings of Power getting review bombed? Amazon suspends ratings. This is by James Hibbard of The Hollywood Reporter. The Lord of the Rings TV series has only a 37% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with some complaining about the show's diversity. Amazon halts reviews to prevent trolling. Sorry, I've got pop-ups. So, go away. So, where are we? The mega-budget fantasy series, The Lord of the Rings of Power, is under fire from some of its viewers. A day after the first 2 episodes of Amazon's billion-dollar baby debuted on Prime Video, the show's average audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is a rotten 37%, and reviews on Amazon have been outright suspended. Wow. So yes, they've suspended them. Now, I understand why they've suspended them. It's not a good look, but you can't be doing that. You allow the comments to be there. Once you suspend them, the fans who are going against you are going to say, you're taking our voices away. You're doing it on purpose because you know this is a bad show. I don't think it is a bad show. It's not a good look for any company to do this. Compare that score to TV critics giving the show a very fresh 83% average. But, as I said earlier, I don't trust the critic scores, the verified critic scores, any more than I do the audience scores. And many of the reviews were highly enthusiastic. It's great, gorgeously immersive, and grandly ambitious spectacle packed with stunning imagery and compelling plot threads, wrote TV Line. The Hollywood Reporter dubbed the first 2 episodes a rather successful, promising start. And to be honest with you, that's exactly how I feel. I think the verified critics are right this time. That's just my opinion. And you are happy to comment down below constructively and politely. I'm always happy to listen to opposing opinions. That isn't an attack on me. And me not having the same opinions as you is not an attack on you or invalidating you. It's about us having a discussion. And if we can't have these discussions, why do we get up in the morning and go online? The scores come a couple of weeks after Marvel's She-Hulk was declared review bombed on the site, with 88% critic score and an initial 36% audience score. Right, I haven't watched She-Hulk. Look, the review bombing thing is a thing. That's clear. But when you let audiences go on these things and do whatever they want, what do you think's going to happen? It's like leaving a kid in a fucking candy shop, right? How the Rings of Power is doing on Amazon's own user review ecosystem is not yet clear because the company has taken the unusual step of suspending user ratings for the show. An Amazon source says reviews are being held 72 hours to help weed out trolls and to ensure each review is legitimate. The source later claimed Prime Video started the policy this summer on all its shows. So, how can you show if a review is legitimate or not? Who are you to say if a review is legitimate or not? Someone may have issues with the show. How do you know it's legitimate or not? And are you going to say that a bot without a profile picture isn't legitimate? You know, we're really going into Adolf Hitler territory here, and it's a very dangerous game to play. But the industry started this by letting these people do reviews in the first place. I've never understood why. Review bombing is when a group of online users post numerous negative reviews for a product or service due to its perceived cultural or political issues rather than its actual quality. Pursuing Rotten Tomatoes audience reviews for Rings of Power, there are some one-star entries that meet the definition. They wanted to involve such an important work with current politics and they have succeeded. Reads an example. Nobody has a problem with seeing people of colour in movies, series or stories, but this story was already written and should not have been sullied. Opined another, reflecting world diversity in Middle-earth is an odd goal. Albeit good for marketing maybe, but it was clearly more important than sick making a functional TV series. But the majority of the negative reviews, whatever the writer's private feeling, criticised the show for non-diversity reasons. They spent $1 billion on backdrops and the film score wrote one, the rest is slow-moving wooden acting and there is no reason to actually like the main characters. There is no soul to any of it. And, you know, is that a fair criticism? Well, I suppose you could say that in places, but in other places that's wrong. As I say, the young woman they're calling female Frodo, you know, the fandom menace, I don't know her name, that's why I'm just kind of identifying her like that. I think she's great. I think there is soul in her performance when she finds that wizard and she wants to help him. She goes back, her father's been injured, and you see how devastated and guilty she feels. So I don't think it's soulless. I've seen soulless modern day, you know, entertainment being made. And I do think there's an effort being made here to do something compelling. Yes, we have got kind of, people from cultures that haven't been represented before properly being represented in main roles, but we've also got white male leads, female leads, you could argue that the main character, Galadriel, is a white female, right? But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be about the representation and inclusion. That should just be there. Amazon made a mistake. This is what they do these days. They talk and talk and talk about politics, about identity politics, instead of talking about the plot and what they're actually doing with the series. We can see there's representation. We can see that there's a black elf and things like that, right? We can see it. It's fine, it's cool. But the more you bash people over the head in the marketing about it, the more backs you put up. And this is where the problem really is. There was one aspect even the show's biggest haters seem to agree on. The Rings of Power looks amazing, stunningly beautiful world, wrote a review, sadly was bored out of my mind. But you're bored out of your mind because isn't this what the books are like anyway? A lot of talking. Rather than, but we saw some stunning moments when Galadriel was drowning, etc., etc. There was some good, exciting moments. I think one of the things is today's audience is really used to this fast kind of brainless pacing, and there's not a lot of dialogue in the MCU and stuff like that, and the fast saga, and they're used to that. So when they see something that's got a bit of nuance, a bit of conversation, they call it boring and they call it slow pacing. Over at TV Line, the site's post-premiere poll suggested most viewers had a much more positive reaction, with 62% of viewers granting the show an A rating. Fair enough, I agree. Amazon's own IMDb, but hasn't suspended that site's audience ratings. IMDb's scores were likewise higher than those on Rotten Tomatoes, albeit still middling with a 6.1 average score out of 10. Like with Rotten Tomatoes, most viewers gave the show either the best possible score, 10, or the worst possible score, 1. The latter suggesting there's at least some degree of outrage blasting going on. Interestingly, The Rings of Power delivered a high average score among females 6.8, the males 5.9. You see, this is what they're always trying to do. They're trying to divide us. They're trying to divide the genders. And people with different identity pronouns are doing it all the time. So, is it going to be more liked by females? I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know how that's relevant. Maybe it's relevant to their marketing and how they can make money off of it. But, you know, again, does it really matter? Personally, I hate these aggregate scores. I think they're fucking pointless. And they're now causing trouble. Do away with them. You don't need them. You've got social media. You can do all your research from social media. Scrap the aggregate scorelines and the reviews, and you won't have a fucking problem. If people want to talk about it on videos like this, then they can. If review bombing is occurring, the audience score will likely rise. She-Hulk climbed from 36% on Rotten Tomatoes to 50% in the last week and should climb further if the show delivers in its future episodes. Fans come to major franchise titles with a lot of expectations, but if the shows manage to deliver consistent quality over time, they tend to eventually win people over and move those audience scores. But for the moment, at least on Amazon's site, reviews shall not pass. Yes, so a very interesting situation. Amazon suspending those reviews, and it's a very passive-aggressive thing to do, isn't it? But it's a problem. It's a problem because if you're going to do these things, if you're going to have these aggregate meters, then they've at least got to be accurate. But people are always going to abuse something. And that's the problem here. Judge it on its merits. Even if you don't like the fact there's representation and inclusion, that's not, you shouldn't be judging that any more than people when critics review something and say there's not enough inclusion and representation here, I'm giving it a lower score. That's as wrong as voting something down for having representation and inclusion. Anyway, it's a long, divisive conversation and it's never going to stop. And my final thoughts on today's very long podcast, and I hope you've enjoyed all the talking points, is that we consume entertainment and sports very differently. Back in the day when I was a kid, the consumers weren't as bright as they are today. They're as bright because they research, they've got the internet, they've got social media. You know, they could be like me and start little channels that nobody watches, but at least you get to have your say right. The audience have got a lot up top today. There's no fooling them. It's a very, very difficult situation. It's not like when I was a kid. We just watch stuff. If we watched a bad movie, we go to ourselves, well, that was a little bit underwhelming, but we didn't have the tools to start bitching about it. Every Tuesday on my day off, I used to literally go to Our Price or HMV and buy a random film I'd never heard of. And I'd watch it, and if it was crap, I'd throw it to one side because they were very cheap back in the day. But if you found a gem, it was very exciting. But nowadays, it's very, very different. There's so much hatred and negativity when talking, and passion. Passion's a problem as well, because passion can overspill. And now supporting movies and loving movies and television has become like, you know, supporting a sporting team. And that comes with a lot of hatred and aggression. And for me, that's a very, very sad situation. It makes me sad, not for myself, but for you. I've got every single movie and series that I love in my cabinet there. I can watch it whenever I want. I can have the great memories of me being a young man and watching this great entertainment. There is some great entertainment out there today, but unfortunately, now we've got too much of a good thing. You can go on Netflix or Prime or anything else, Disney Plus, and there's all this great stuff on it. It's too much of a good thing. We used to fantasize about this as kids, didn't we, people of my age? And now we've got it. We've opened the box of delights, and now it's become not the box of delights, but the box of cursing. Now, so because everyone has a voice via social media now, we're arguing with actors, producers, directors. We're all at war. We're all screaming at each other. We're all so angry at each other. But why are we so angry? Because we have opposing political views. We have opposing religions. We have opposing kind of a mindset on how the world should be. But once we just realize that this is entertainment, and if we don't enjoy it, put it to one side, shrug our shoulders. And if we do enjoy it, celebrate it. That's what we should be doing. But this is human nature, and this is what humans are like. And it's very sad what's happened to the entertainment industry. Not just the extremism that's happening, you know, to it right now and the calling out of its main consumer, but actually the reaction from fans to the people making this content and running this content. It's become the loudest of shouting matches, and for me, that's very sad. It makes me sad where we are today in entertainment. It's sad, people, because the entertainment, artistic medium is something to be enjoyed, like the first time I watched Smallville or 24 or Alias or Lost. Fantastic feeling to watch something that you can embrace, that you can immerse with, escape with. It's a beautiful feeling. And when I watched Rings of Power yesterday, I couldn't hate it. I started to like it. There were certain elements there where you could see their extremism, of course, but we are in the modern era today. But we live in a new, changed world, and we're not going back to the old ways. Once you open Pandora's box, you can't shut it again. This is the world we live in, and we have to embrace the change, but the entertainment industry and the extremists have to understand there's ways and means about changing the world, and what you don't do is attack people who are scared of change. We all come together and we help each other walk through the light. This has been the Movies TV Mad podcast with me, Mick Minos, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Please tap the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Until we see each other again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.